Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down one of the most tragic and honestly, one of the most pivotal moments in the history of flying. We're talking about the Charkhi Dadri disaster.
So let's start with the central mystery, the question that just seems impossible to answer. With all the technology we have, with air traffic controllers watching every move, how in the world can two massive airplanes collide in a gigantic empty sky? It just doesn't seem possible. And yet, it happened.
349. That's the number of souls that were lost on November 12, 1996. It was, and still is, the deadliest mid-air collision the world has ever seen. An absolutely devastating number.
Okay, so to really understand what went so terribly wrong, we first need to understand how things are supposed to go right. Let's dive into how thousands of planes navigate the skies safely every single day.
You know what helps to think of the sky not as this big, empty space, but as a network of invisible highways? They're called airways. And every plane has to stick to its designated route, just like you stick to a lane on the freeway. And the folks directing all this traffic, that's air traffic control, or ATC.
Now here's what's so interesting about this. The core safety idea is actually super simple. Planes heading east fly at odd altitudes, like 35 or 37,000 feet. Planes going west fly at even altitudes, so 34 or 36,000 feet. What does that do? It automatically creates a 1,000-foot buffer of empty space between them. It's supposed to be a foolproof system.
All right, Section 2. Let's introduce the two aircraft that were set on an intersecting course that evening over India.
So on one hand, we have Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907, an Ilyushin cargo plane carrying a group of merchants heading to Delhi to do some shopping. On the other, we have a massive Boeing 747, Saudi Airlines Flight 763, full of Indian laborers flying to Saudi Arabia for work. Two totally different journeys about to meet in the most horrific way.
And this is a really crucial point. They were intentionally placed on the exact same path, the same airway. One was heading out, the other was coming in. Their safety relied entirely on maintaining that 1,000-foot vertical separation.
Okay, look at how this builds. The Saudi jet takes off and is told to climb to 14,000 feet. The Kazakh plane is told to descend to 15,000 feet. A minute before the collision, the Saudi pilot confirms he's holding steady at 14,000. Then, the Kazakh pilot reports that he has reached 15,000. So, on paper, and according to what the pilots were saying, that 1,000-foot safety gap was perfectly in place.
Now this is where things get critical. It all came down to a few key communications with one single air traffic controller, a man named VK Dutta.
So Dutta issues a pretty standard traffic warning to the Kazakh crew. He's essentially saying, hey guys, there's a 747 coming straight at you about 10 miles away. Let me know when you see it.
But here's a critical piece of the puzzle, a factor that Dutta on the ground couldn't have fully understood the impact of. On the Kazakh flight deck, the entire flight crew only spoke Russian. So they had a separate radio operator whose job it was to translate all the English instructions from air traffic control. You can imagine how that could create delays or confusion.
And that's exactly what happened. That initial warning from the controller, it wasn't fully understood. There was a moment of confusion, a hesitation, and the radio operator had to ask for clarification, a moment that proved absolutely catastrophic.
So Dutta clarifies. He says the other plane is now just 8 miles away, and it's flying at 140, or 14,000 feet.
And the last words ever heard from Kazakhstan Flight 1907 were simply, now looking.
Just seconds after that last transmission, a U.S. Air Force crew flying nearby reported seeing a massive explosion in the sky. So when the investigators started digging in, what did they uncover?
This was the bombshell finding from the flight data recorder. The 1,000-foot buffer, that critical safety gap, it never actually existed. When the Kazakh crew reported being at 15,000 feet, they were actually still descending through it.
You see, it wasn't just one single mistake. It was this cascade of failures, all lining up perfectly for disaster. You had the pilot error, failing to level off. You had the language barrier, which cost them precious seconds. You even had questions about the procedure itself. And on top of it all, Delhi's radar technology at the time was old. It couldn't actually show the controller the plane's altitudes. It was just dots on a screen.
The Charkhi Dadri collision sent shockwaves through the entire aviation world. It forced immediate and sweeping changes to make sure this could never, ever happen again.
And this is amazing, because the lessons learned from this one tragedy directly protect every single person who flies today. TCAS, a system that automatically warns pilots of a collision risk, became mandatory.
Strict English proficiency standards were put in place for all international pilots, and airports everywhere upgraded to advanced radar that shows not just a plane's position, but its exact altitude.
This disaster really goes to show that while technology provides these absolutely critical safety nets, the human element, the pilot, the controller, it remains the most complex and vital part of the entire system.